What's up everyone, it's Adar coming at you with another episode of Startup Engineering Daily. Let's hop right into it. So our first tweet is from this guy, Amarnath, who's building a product called Thinking with Alma, but he has a really cool breakdown of the internal workings, especially on the JavaScript rendering side for Paper, which is essentially a new Figma clone. I think there's also a product called Pencil, but Paper is like kind of the new Figma, MCP controlled. No, Figma has MCP as well, but it's very popular, and it got posted by the founder, and he said it was pretty accurate. So you can see here, he decompiled their Electron app and read through roughly 128,000 lines of beautified code. Actually, Opus did. That's pretty funny. But you can see here he breaks down the renderer. It's a Vite SPA built on top of Electron and a React application with MobX State and a node tree that looks familiar if you've worked on editors before. And he just says here, like, you have a frame which returns JSX inside of a div. That's the name of the article as well, as div is all you need. And he says text is also rendered through DOM elements and rectangles follow the same pattern. He also shows the JavaScript for how they do zooming, which is a matrix 3D transform. And then it's pretty cool. Like, I don't know much about editors, but just in terms of like using HTML in a smart way, they do use Canvas, but they don't use it for the actual rendering. They kind of use it for the layer on top. So if you use Figma, you'll kind of understand like the selection rectangles, which I assume is like from dragging, selection outlines, snap lines, which is like the horizontal and vertical lines for fixing to grids, drag ghosts and drop parent highlights, and the overlay is redrawn on demand here in this render function. And then also for shaders, they use WebGL2. And he just says like why the div choice matters. The main takeaway is that Paper uses divs and browser CSS for the primary document model. The direct consequences are browser and layout text rendering are part of the editor itself. DOM events and DOM measurement can be used directly. HTML and CSS are closer to the internal representation, and performance will be constrained by DOM scale rather than by a custom scene renderer. This is the architectural trade-off. Paper behaves more like a visual HTML/CSS editor with Canvas-based tooling layered on top. If the goal is fidelity to a web platform, that is a coherent choice. So pretty interesting. If you wanted to decompile and check it out, you could, but just kind of fascinating right up here. Next, we have a tweet from this guy, John L. Noble, who is a veteran British paratrooper, and I believe he's a paraplegic. I'm not 100% sure. I don't even know if that word is like offensive or not, but he is one of the patients of Neuralink for the N1 implant, and he just has a write-up here talking about his story of getting the implant and how it went. So the surgery on day 0 was surprisingly easy. A quick general anesthetic, small incision, and the robotic system did the rest. 1,024 ultra-thin threads into his motor cortex. He woke up alert and in good spirits and went home the next afternoon. By day 3, he was feeling a lot better, and by day 7, the scar was starting to fade. He felt sharper and more positive than he had been in years after the BCI was turned on. I doubt that's like neurochemical, right? That's probably more of like the mentality of like being able to try something new, but maybe there is some neurochemical pieces to making him feel better. And then he said in week 2, they paired the implant with an Apple MacBook, which is so interesting, like imagining the code that they're writing there. And they went through calibration sessions, so I'm sure it's like specific software where they calibrate like the brainwaves, I guess, to operating within the computer, and he can start scrolling, clicking, and typing. He says at first it felt like trying to remember a dream, but by week 3 it was second nature, and he went from total Mac newbie to power user faster than I ever expected. And then he says like by day 80 he was ready for the big leagues. That's when he fired up World of Warcraft for the first time with pure thought control. The first raid felt clunky, but once my brain and BCI synced, it was pure magic. I'm now raiding and exploring Azeroth hands-free at full speed, no mouse, no keyboard intention. He talks about like all the positive feedback, and he's 100 days in and he can't imagine life without it. I'm not sure how much the video will be able to capture, but you can see here that he is like playing and clicking all with his brain. I don't know if he's actually using abilities though, but oh yeah, he is. He's actually clicking on them, but I think he could use the keys as well, and he can type out like all of his tweets, I believe is what he's doing. And it's just really incredible. You know, Neuralink, obviously there's some dystopian pieces to it and people are a bit afraid, and I know like for me, I'm not going to be the first one to go with it, but it's undeniable the results they've been having with all of their patients. I know there was the one guy who was playing chess and Dota, I think, or StarCraft as well, and just super fascinating. And it's interesting to think from a software engineering perspective, like the amount of testing they have to do. Like I'm sure they're testing on animals would be my guess, or maybe they just have like a perfectly like unit tested version of the brain or the system that they're operating on. I don't know if we fully mapped the brain to a level that they can test it like this, but I'm guessing like the specific pieces that they enable or act on, like the motor cortex is like very much mapped and very much tested, but still like very scary if you're one of these engineers, and I'm sure they've been working super hard on it and just super fascinating to keep up with. Okay, next we have some compliance drama. So I'm not sure if you've heard of the company Delve, but like Ryan says here, they're a YC-backed compliance startup that raised $32 million, and apparently they've been accused of systematically faking SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and GDPR compliance reports for hundreds of clients. SOC 2 is essentially a compliance system that shows that you're doing certain things. Like the main pieces, as far as I can tell, are like audit logging and secure access, or like limited access for people to do their jobs. Like don't give them more access than they need to do like the specific actions they're doing. And Basically, the claim is that they're using the same template, like 99.8% of reports all have the same typos and grammatical errors, 493 out of 494 leak SOC 2 reports. And you can see here they also have this type 2 piece, which is like their SOC 2 type 1 and SOC 2 type 2. And he's saying all 259 type 2 reports claim 0 security incidents, 0 personnel changes, 0 customer terminations, and 0 cyber incidents during the observation period, with identical unable to test conclusions across every client. That is a bit sketchy. Like, I know that SOC 2 is not like super hands-on, like you can do a lot and you kind of just need to meet like the specific pieces and do compliance and have your employees onboard onto the Delph platform. But the fact that there was 0 security incidents is quite interesting. And basically they also say their US-based auditors are actually a corp and gradient described as Indian certification mills operating through US shell entities. 99% of clients reportedly went through one of these 2 firms over the past 6 months, and just a bunch of other things. I don't know exactly what the takeaway is going to be. It is very interesting. They did have this ad campaign that people were laughing about where it was like avoiding your CISO, which is like your chief information security officer, going to prison. And now it's like, wow, you might actually be fined 4% of your global revenue under GDPR for compliance violations, which isn't SOC 2, it's separate obviously. But also both of the founders are in Forbes 30 under 30, which kind of speaks to like the trend of being on that list means bad things are coming for you or your company. But nonetheless, we'll have to keep an eye on it. I know people are also saying that it's probably like one of their competitors who is doing a hit piece on them. So that does have to be kept in mind as well. Like, it's a very competitive landscape and there are a bunch of competitors to Delve. And even though Delve came in and really captured the market because of how quick they were helping companies become SOC 2 compliant. And also there was another tweet that I saw a couple days ago that was also showing that like a lot of their reports were actually like not securely held. I believe they were on Supabase, you know, all the vibe coding problems that happen with Supabase where people just leave their objects open or leave their tables open without row level security. So that's obviously problematic. I don't understand how these companies can raise millions of dollars, 32 million, and not just have like their Claude check if they have open security vulnerabilities and make sure all their files are secure. But people were leaking some of their reports, like these 493, I guess, is part of that group of reports that were leaked and were just found to be public. So that's very problematic, you know, and it's just crazy that people can't build like these basic systems where it's like just copy the link and check if you can access it in incognito and you'll be able to tell if it's public or not. But I guess probably was a trade-off to not have to build more complex software. But it's like you raise 30 million, you know, just get someone in there or just get like a basic security audit, you know, to check for some of these basic things. Okay, next we have a tweet from Andy Fong, who is the CTO of DoorDash. I presume that's how you pronounce his name. And they're posting about this new feature where Dashers can now get paid to do general tasks. They think this will be huge for building the frontier of physical intelligence. Looking forward to see where this goes. So you can see here, for example, you could get $16 to scan shelves in a store where you're taking these pictures. I think they also had one that was like doing dishes or just like very basic tasks that you can do, but you can get paid to do it as opposed to just delivering items to people. I think this is pretty fascinating, you know, kind of on this dystopian stuff we were talking about earlier. Like, I don't know how much of this is like, are you just working to train robots to replace you? Is there like negative value in that? But even if you like approach it from first principles of like, what are you going to do otherwise? You know, they're going to pay people to do this. This is the market and the economy is like doing this kind of work. The only way you can kind of get around like not getting paid like to be replaced is essentially doing a general strike, which in my opinion is never going to happen because people care more about themselves in America than, you know, achieving some greater goal. And the people that are highly paid obviously aren't going to do a general strike. So it would have to be the lowest paid workers who would do it. But nonetheless, pretty cool software, and who knows where this data is going. I don't know what partners they have on the robotics. I know they're doing like the robotic delivery, right, is being done by all of these different companies, and those companies are themselves partners with DoorDash and Uber, etc. I'm sure they have strategic partnerships where they own some stock. I don't think any of these delivery companies actually have their own robotics platforms, but nonetheless, this data is going to be super powerful, super unique, and it kind of speaks to like the Scale AI acquisition from Meta, where it's like the labeled data is still very important, you know, like the AI isn't going to be able to create the data. My friend was telling me that you can just like watch YouTube videos with AI and it'll like really get a lot of the physical data and physical intelligence. I know that like OpenAI, when they were first training Sora, they talked about, there was that whole meme of Mira like cringing when they asked if they trained on YouTube because it was so obvious they did, even though it goes against the terms of service. So I'm not sure why they still need all of this labeled data, or if it's just like such a massive amount of data is required that even every single YouTube video doesn't cover it. But nonetheless, they have these tasks. If you're like a DoorDasher, it might be getting rolled out to you and you can check it out. Okay, next we have a tweet from Mateo, who is one of the contributors to NodeJS, and he's also the co-founder and CTO of Platformatic, which I believe is like a hosting platform for Node.js, built with like best principles, especially on the performance side. As you can see here, they benchmark a few different front-end libraries for hosting React apps specifically. So Tan Stack Start, React Router, and Next.js running the exact e-commerce app at 1,000 requests per second on Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service. And he says the results were eye-opening. So you can see here, using their platform, Watt, it was doing 1,000 requests per second. Using Node as well for Tan Stack was doing 1,000 requests per second. React Router was doing 800 requests per second. Next V16 was doing 700, and then Next V15 was doing 300 to 200. So this is very easy to dunk on Next, and also the success rate here is very interesting. So this is, I'm presuming, how many requests were successful, as well as the latency they have here, where on TanStack Start it was 12 to 13 milliseconds, whereas Next 15 it got up to 8 to 11 seconds on average. That's not even P99. So that's quite bad, but, and to be fair, it is an e-commerce platform that they're testing. It's not like a web application with like severe client interactivity and like all of these different things that happen after the render. It's like kind of making that first request, I believe, is what they're testing here. But you can see it's a trading card marketplace. Think TCG player with 10,000 cards, 100 sellers, 50,000 listings, full SSR, no caching, random 1 to 5 millisecond simulated DB latency. And he did have a tweet as well saying that there was like a little bit of a discrepancy, so they were going to test it again. I'm not sure what the results of that were, but very fascinating. You know, TanStack Start from Tanner Lindsley, incredible work, clearly, that it can do 12 milliseconds average latency with 100% request rate and over 1,000 requests per second throughput, whereas Next was at like 55% success rate with 187 requests per second. I'm sure they have like some rebuttal. I don't know. I don't think I actually saw Guillermo respond to this, but I believe he might have. But nonetheless, if you're doing like a very high scale content driven SSR platform, I guess like not statically rendered, but SSR driven content, TanStack Start, it does look like something very solid to look into. And I know a lot of people are really hype about it. And obviously like TanStack Query is used in pretty much every React app now as like the main data fetching library. Okay, last we have a tweet from Kimi AI, which is a Chinese company from Moonshot AI, which is a open source model, Kimi K2.5 from Moonshot AI, which is a Chinese based company. Obviously China right now is pretty much the only country that's doing open source models, that's doing open source LLMs at this point. I know Meta was doing Llama for a while, but I don't know when the last Llama release was, and if there was one, nobody's been talking about it, I guess from a performance and benchmark perspective. But there was some drama because Cursor, which is the IDE that was a fork of VS Code, launched their new model called Composer 2, which they basically hid behind the scenes. I don't know exactly how it was leaked or how people figured it out, but it was Kimi K2.5 under the hood, so it wasn't their own custom model that they built, which is interesting because I do know Cursor has a lot of research staff, so it is kind of interesting to just think from a CEO perspective of like why they aren't investing in building their own model versus just layering on top of an open source model. But a lot of people were getting mad at them, and I don't really know if the hate was exactly justified. Like I think the whole purpose of open source models is that you're supposed to be able to build on top of them, and it seems like Kimi is like an MIT-ish license where if you're making over like $20 million a month in revenue, then you need to have their license, which is where some of their drama was, or you have to say that you're using Kimi K2.5 under the hood in the terms of service. So there was a bit of drama that like they hadn't spoken with the lawyers essentially from Kimi, but as you can see here from this tweet, they did come together and they did come to an agreement. So now they're all good, but people are still saying like Cursor kind of operated this poorly, and I know Lee Rob was like in the comments to a lot of people. I don't know exactly what they were discussing though, because open source models are the whole point, you know, and all of software is built on open source, but Cursor specifically, like their culture is built on the fact that they forked VS Code to build their initial product, but they did so well and now it's worth $50 billion. So I don't know, just something interesting. I don't think there's gonna be more drama. It is interesting to think that like Composer isn't being built in-house. You know, I know that I'm sure that they're doing some layering on top, and obviously they have the Cursor harness, which has all of the background agents and all of the specific coding stuff that they've added, but nonetheless very interesting. If this kind of stuff interests you and you want to talk with some like-minded people, join the Audinato Discord in the description. Thanks.